a mandate. She just had to help people become Christians, and people could see it can happen. People can become Christians. Whereas at Melbourne, when I got there, I just went, actually, these students are pretty amazing, and how good would it be if we equip them to get better at this? And then, they all then felt equipped to be able to have conversations. So at that point, we had sort of a fairly big group, and I just went, man, I'm just one person. How about if we all get on board with this? Anyway, out of that, ripple effect ended up sort of coming about. It sort of had a transition of names. So this is our sort of hopefully final name. But what I sort of thought what I would do is just talk about how we got to the point of actually putting together this course. And when you go into a situation, so I'm actually giving you the principles of problem solving. So the first one is, what's the reality? What's the reality of the situation in terms of evangelism? So tell me, what's the reality? How many people do become Christians here? What do you think the reality of this situation with most of the people in your missional communities, group? What do you think the reality is of evangelism at this point in time? At Regen.
For my missional community, so a lot of people in the missional community are quite new to Regen. They've only joined the past year, and because of the end of the COVID lockdown. I think there's been a growing sense of people like who have been needing the urgency towards evangelism.
Right.
I think where a couple of people are currently more new to the church.
Yeah. So there's a growing sort of concern, I guess, about. Awesome. Do you think people are good at evangelism or feel confident in it?
I think some are, but probably most are a bit intimidated.
Yeah. So some are good, but some feel a bit intimidated. Yeah. Okay. Well, when I got to see you at Melbourne Uni, what I realised what would happen is people would come from year 12 and basically come to a Christian group because they wanted to meet other Christians. And so they then formed friendships there, but then they didn't actually form non-Christian friendships in terms of in their courses and stuff like that, because they spent all their time with people from CU. And they had quite a lot of culture around event-based evangelism. So each second semester you would run a big mission, all that sort of stuff. And what I worked out was the evangelism was done by the arts students. Now, why do you reckon that would have happened? Why was evangelism pretty well... Everyone on the committee was from the arts faculty. Why do you think that would have happened? A bit more creative, so they're thinking that sort of way. Some of them were reflectors, but some of them were extroverts. Yeah. Do they have arts at Monash? Okay, I just wasn't sure if you had a stereotype or not. Right. Okay. Law, arts. Okay, right. Okay, so the arts culture at Melbourne Uni, they only really had 4 hours of class time. So they basically had so much time. Like, as in, they had a lot of reading and stuff like that, but you could sort of swap that around. So they had the time, and they were also asking those big, deep philosophical sort of questions. And so what I worked out was we basically ran these deep philosophical question style arts things. And I was asking a science student, I said, could you invite one of your friends along to this? And they went, nah, like none of my friends even think like this. And I just went, oh, interesting. And we basically just didn't see that many people become Christians, maybe 3 to 4 a year. And that's okay. But I'm going, okay, can we do this better? And they did want people to become Christians. That was the thing that I observed, but they just sort of felt disheartened about it. And they really, didn't have the friendships to invite people along. And it also wasn't a very diverse group. It was pretty well all, I don't know, I feel terrible stereotyping, but white, nerdy sort of people is sort of... Anyway, so it didn't really reflect, like there was no college students, there was no, it just didn't reflect the uni in terms of how that was. So that was the reality of the situation that I went into. Okay, so really then, what was sort of the problems, I guess? So I kept on asking questions. So just kept on finding out what was going on for people. And the thing that I realised was they didn't feel equipped to talk about their faith. And you go really from, primary school into high school. And what I worked out was they actually had a Sunday school faith. And then they arrive at Melbourne Uni, which is massively academic. People are really thinking things at a high level. And they felt ill-equipped in terms of how do you talk about some things. They also didn't pray much. They didn't really, I felt, didn't have a heart for non-Christians and, really wanting them to, get to know Jesus. And also, the gifted evangelists weren't really acknowledged. So the amazing thing about this church is Stephen is an evangelist. You have a minister who's an evangelist. That's so rare. Like, I would know maybe one other church that has a minister as an evangelist, and that shifts the culture. But if you go to a charismatic church, pretty well all the charismatic pastors are evangelists. And in sort of standard Protestant churches, you only get about 1% of people who are evangelists, gifted evangelists, whereas charismatic churches often have 10%. And that shifts then the culture of things. So at Melbourne Uni, we might have had one or two gifted evangelists, but they wouldn't have even known that if they were. The other thing that was a bit of a problem was, I don't know, you're probably a bit too young for this, but we had this guy who used to come to every single public meeting that we had, who was the president of the Atheist Society, and he was totally in love with this girl. And so he came along, and then he critiqued our public meetings on Facebook of what we said and what we didn't say. And so basically, we just, it was every week I'd just be going, oh man, like the person up the front said this, this guy's going to totally smash us on that. So we basically just had to get better. We had so much Christianese sort of language. We had unthought thoughts. Like he just totally nailed us in terms of all the different things that we were saying up front. And I just went, we've become lazy as Christians in terms of we all just assume that we understand this. So, that was a bit of a problem. We really only had a few non-Christians coming to things. We had a few issues. And in fact, I feel really bad, and thankfully Mosh isn't here because now I can bag out Melbourne Uni and see you. I felt really bad. I went along to one of the first sort of evening things, and the whole table were trying to work out the Latin word Latin origin of a word, and they spent 20 minutes talking about it, and I was just like, what? And then they finally worked it out, and they were high-fiving each other. We worked out the Latin origin of this word, and I'm just going, how on earth are these people going to be able to talk about Jesus to anyone? Anyway, that was a particular group that definitely actually connected with other people like them at Melbourne Uni who weren't Christians, but I just going, oh man, we've got so much work to do. Okay, so then I went, well, what are our values? So when you're problem solving, you look at, well, what's the reality, what are the problems, and what do we value as a Christian group? Or what do we want to value, I guess. We might not be able to get there, but prayer was definitely one of the things that everyone kept on saying, we should pray more. Do you ever hear that? And you probably feel it. We should be praying more for non-Christians. So prayer was one of those. Actually being able to have conversations was a priority. They did want to. They just felt inadequate or unable or just didn't have those sort of conversations. They did want to prioritise evangelism. They wanted non-Christians in their life, that sort of stuff. And they really did want to pray, be prepared as much as they could. And there's a passage, Colossians 4:2-6. I think I talked about this last time, but I just want to read it out. And this sort of is the values behind Ripple Effect. It's devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful, and pray for us too, that God may open a door for our message, so that we may proclaim the mystery of Christ, for which I am in chains. Pray that I may proclaim it clearly as I should. Be wise in the way you act towards outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. So that was sort of the verse or the passage behind Ripple Effect. So we wanted prayer to be really important. We wanted, we wanted people to be able to proclaim the mystery of Christ. We wanted people to be wise in the way they acted towards outsiders and to make the most of every opportunity and let their conversation be always full of grace. So that's what's behind Ripple Effect, basically. Okay, so then we're going, all right, well, how can we solve this problem in terms of if we want people to be praying? So I don't know, do you have prayer meetings here? And yep, and I think they're quite well attended is what I hear. Is that right? Yep. Whereas we would have prayer meetings at Melbourne Uni and maybe 2, maybe 5 people would come. And you're going, that's interesting. So what the Ripple Effect is it's each week trying to get people to pray regularly and pray for non-Christians. And so I think what that does is it means we become dependent on God. It means that we start looking and seeing what God might be doing. And I've done Ripple Effect now for 10 years. I keep on redoing the courses with people, and it shifts me. It shifts me in terms of each week I'm praying and I'm just seeing what God might do. And this passage is good because it's basically saying, it's God who gives us the opportunities, and you start looking out what opportunities might God be doing. So praying regularly is really a big part of it. And also in terms of being able to share, so pray and then share the conversations you have had, whether they've been good or not good, or just to try and equip and help each other. That's part of the thing, is praying and sharing, and actually then to be a bit more equipped, to be trained up. And what I worked out was that we needed to be doing this regularly. And at one point, I think we had about 180 students every week praying for non-Christians. How crazy is that? What might God do through that? And I just go, man, if you can have your missional communities praying every week for the non-Christians around you, what might God do? And it shifts us. Anyway, so what we did was we got one person to volunteer to be a leader. They're more of a facilitator. So the material's all there. You don't have to do too much. You just watch a little video and then you go through this sort of Bible study, really. And then you want to be able to allow time to be able to pray and to share. What I worked out was actually praying and sharing. If we did that first, then we could bring in or out the training in terms of the time, whereas I actually really wanted prayer to be a priority, and so we often did the sharing of conversations, And just, the funnel sort of thing in terms of, being able to love people, social, just seeing where people are on that. And so even if you've done a thing of love, that you're able to share that. I think the interesting thing was we didn't have a culture of talking about that as Christians. And often in my church, my Christian friends go, I hate hearing you talking about all the conversations that you're having because I just feel so bad. And I'm just going, well, this is terrible. This is terrible as a culture in our church. We should be talking about and caring for and looking at. And so that's what ended up happening was we organised groups of 4. So one person who volunteered to lead and 3 others, because that meant 4 was a good enough group because you'd meet every week. And what ended up happening was we did it in year levels so that they started meeting each other's friends because they were similar year. You'd had 3 whole years. And in fact, one girl who started, one young woman, I should say, in first year, in second year, she was in a tutorial and she just sat down and sat next to this woman. And it was an unusual name and they introduced themselves and she goes, oh, I'm such and such. And this person went, this is the girl I've been praying for. Like as in, this is another. And she goes, oh, do you happen to know such and such? And she goes, oh, yeah, she's a really good friend. And he goes, yes, I know she is. We've been praying for you. She didn't say that. But it just means that actually what it shows is you start caring for each other's groups of friends, and that makes the social things a bit more easy because you're actually really praying for each other's thing. And so what happened was we started off, I just trialled it out with a couple of groups, and then those 2 groups loved it and God did quite amazing things. And in the first semester, but they still didn't feel quite equipped, and they said, could we please keep doing this? So then we did a second semester, so we did 2 semesters, 1 year's worth of training. And then they said, this is awesome, can we please do that? And then other groups had started up, so we ended up with 3 courses over 3 semesters. Then it kept going. So basically we did 6 courses because actually people wanted to keep going. So the first course is really establishing that people are Christians themselves when they're in the group. So the first course is really about Jesus and the Gospels. And what it does is it's an introduction to evangelism as such, in that you can have non-Christians along, totally fine, and they get to hear the gospel, but it's also just working out, do I actually have non-Christians? It's really that basic sort of thinking in terms of you working out which course might suit your missional community. This is the first course. The second course is about Jesus and conversations. So it's starting to notice, and we're going to actually look at this in the second after morning tea, is look at how do you notice gospel themes in conversations and working out, how can I get there? And then the third course is how do you actually help people get to know Jesus through the Bible, so reading the Bible with someone. The fourth course is apologetics, so looking at belief blockers that people have. The fifth course is, I've done now 7 or 8 courses, so we're trying to squeeze it back into 6. But one of them is looking at how to live your life out in a way that's much more strategic and is integrated in terms of how you go about living out. Or we might do, how do you disciple someone who's a newish Christian? And the last one is thinking about cross cultures and overseas sort of stuff. So basically we've just done 2 at the moment, and it's really to disciple people in evangelism. So my observation is that our Christian faith is at this point, but we're almost it's almost a cross-cultural exercise with someone who's not a Christian. Does that make sense? They think completely differently, and how do you bring those together. And we haven't done enough work as a church, I would say, in Australia, in the fact that we've got less and less people becoming Christians. So I actually think we need being discipled in evangelism. And why not put that effort in? Like, as in, if you're going to be a Christian for the next, how old are you? You're like only 20. So for the next 60 years, why not get discipled in being good at talking about your faith? And you get just more confident in terms of, I know where this conversation could go. I know what things my non-Christian friends need to think through. I know where we could go in that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've just got better myself. And like, how good would it be if we just all got really equipped? And in fact, at Melbourne Uni, I think I said this last time, when it was coming up to the marriage sort of debate, like the vote that we had to put in, I went, wow, like everyone is actually talking about religion and how this all fits in. Why don't we get really well equipped there's going to be conversations about that. How can we get so equipped that the conversations we have about this turn to Jesus and, yeah, hopefully people become Christians out of it? Like, what a great goal that would be. Like, religion's getting talked about, not necessarily in a positive way, but why don't we make the most of that? And we did. We worked for a whole year with the students on how can we make the most of those conversations. And we did. Like, I got text messages all the time saying, I've just had the most awesome conversation. And we started off going, oh, what are you going to vote? And I'm going, we all knew what the question was going to be. What are you going to vote? And they were so well prepared. And I'm just going, gosh, we could do this as Christians in terms of really getting going. So we looked at the reality of the situation. We looked at what the problems were. We looked at what we as an organisation or as Christians value. And then we tried to work out, well, how can we solve this problem? So my goals in Ripple Effect at Melbourne Uni were, I wanted someone to become a Christian every week, but not through me. I wanted, if we got to the point of having events, that it would help the Christians with their non-Christian friends. I didn't want to run a thing if it didn't actually help. And I didn't want to run stuff unless there was non-Christians basically there. So even our camps, we wanted to be able to have 10% non-Christians. When you get at a camp, which is a Christian camp, if you get over 10%, it goes a little wild in terms of that culture starts being the dominant culture, if that makes sense. But when you're running non-Christian, like evangelistic events, if you get 50-50, that's awesome because they're just one-off, but a whole week together, oh man, it gets crazy. I also wanted it to be that we as a group were just praying regularly for people to become non-Christians. And the question that really shifted me on this was someone asked me, we were talking about it, and I think somebody reflected and said, like, if God answered all our prayers from last week, would anybody have become a Christian? And I think, well, what are we doing with praying? Like, are we just all praying for ourselves? Or, yeah, like it was quite a challenge. And you think about, well, what did you pray for last week? Like, I've got an assignment due on Monday. Like, I'm definitely praying about that. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're prayers for myself, right? Or just all my Christian friends that want their life to be good and comfortable. But actually, yeah, if God answered, if we had been praying for how many non-Christians and they all became Christians, like crazy. Yep, okay, so you get that. The other thing that I really wanted was some gifted evangelists actually coming back as trainees. We just had so many Bible teachers, gifted Bible teachers coming back. And I wanted things happening all the time that I didn't know about. So people were saying, let's go to the movies, and there'd be heaps of Christians and non-Christians. Do you know what I mean? There was just social things. There was love stuff going on. And yeah. So basically, we started with Ripple Effect. Now, the first 3 years doing Ripple Effect, we stopped doing any public sort of evangelism stuff. We just weren't good at it yet, and most of them didn't have non-Christian friends. So for a whole 3 years, we just did relational evangelism and getting people to pray. And I then tried to get through the uni, like through our CU group, after 3 years. So it was a whole generation that hadn't really seen big events. And so I then tried to get them after 3 years. I said, I think we're ready to actually have non-Christians at our evangelistic events. And they said, why would we? We were spending time running things when we could be catching up with our friends. And I went, oh man, the culture has really shifted. And so we finally we tried to do a big evangelistic event, and half of the people who came were non-Christians. It was just fabulous. And the other thing that I tried to do was I got the students to do the evangelistic talks. I worked with them for 3 or 4 months. They were so good. And I needed the Christians, because you build up relational capital with people. And so they'll come to some things just because of your friendship. So they'll give you 2 or 3. That's it. So you want those 2 or 3 things to be amazing, right? And so we got the 3 uni students to do the talks at our mid-year conference, Summit. And somebody became a Christian at Summit through this student giving a talk. He's now back doing a traineeship. He's one of the, Alan Wang, I don't know if you know him, but yeah, he's now doing a traineeship back at Melbourne Uni. He became a Christian, and then, do you know what? Every single person went, what? Someone can become a Christian. So everyone invited all their non-Christians. It was a really, really awesome sort of thing. So you've got to have the stuff that you run. You've got to be able to you've got to use up your relational capital well. All right, so what we've tried to do is make the material as easy as possible on you as leaders. So it means you just facilitate in some ways. You don't have to prepare much. It's all pretty well done. To me, it's fairly basic sort of material in that you want people to go over sort of basic ground and to be all on board. So, feel very welcome to add in or do whatever, because you guys are much more up to speed in some ways than the leaders we had. So, we had to make sure that it was good. So, you get to choose. There are 2 courses that we've just done. We're going to film module 3, 4, and actually we'll try and get to 6 by the end of the year, so we'll try and have some, but I think you guys are just doing it for this semester, right? Yeah, this coming semester, yeah. You get to choose in terms of that. Do you have any questions at this point? Nope. So some churches have started running them, and the feedback, so Officer Presbyterian got their whole church to run it through a term. So they just did 8 weeks, and they did it through their Bible studies groups. And what they did was they did all the training together, and then they broke up into groups of 4 and prayed together and shared conversations. So that's how that's ended up working. Another church, which was pretty well full of oldies, have been meeting together during the day in groups of 4, and they've just been going through it, and they, definitely are getting up to speed. So, it's certainly some of the newer people in terms of doing this, and already Paul's found a few things. I'm going, oh no, we may need to make a few changes still. So I would really appreciate your feedback if you have any. So really keen to see if this actually does help your groups and whether it is equipping. It's slow. So this is meant to be a constant, just praying, sharing, equipping over time. When you've got one course at one point, one of the things that happened was we would often run evangelism training, 101, and it would be for 8 weeks or 10 weeks. And people would come along to that and get excited, but then as soon as they stopped that, then they would just forget about it. So this is meant to be setting up a culture. Does that make sense? A culture of praying, of thinking about the non-Christians around you, the equipping culture, the sharing culture, the praying culture. Does that make sense? So if you can see that in terms of your missional communities and how that might work. Yeah. All right. We're good? Okay. Well, it's now break time. So I think we've got time. Is there anyone that can make coffees here? Yeah. Are we able to have a coffee? Let's have a break, and then I'm actually going to go through sort of some of the principles in the actual training to help you along. Does that sound okay? Yep. Awesome. Cool. I think we've got about 10, 15 minutes. 10. Yep. Awesome. Nice.
Okay, take advantage of your 10-minute break. We won't go longer than 10 minutes. So. There is tea and cordial and water there as well, and some snacks.
others?
Could they do an alpha instead?
Right.
All right. Please make your way back. Look at all that rapt attention when I Okay, please come and sit down. We do have some people have asked some questions, so we already let Julianne know.
It's quite a big break between the two chairs.
Yeah, we moved the chairs yesterday, I think.
Are they coming?
Very.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to talk about some of the questions that people have brought up already and then do the next section.
Well, thank you very much for making a coffee, whoever was they're probably still in the kitchen. Thank you, coffee making people. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's awesome. All right. Okay, so a couple of questions that have come up are, can non-Christians be in the group? Yeah, so that's been a thing that we've had to make sure that non-Christians, because you actually don't ever know, especially when you're starting up, who comes into groups. Sometimes you don't even know where they're up to in terms of are they Christians or not. So the first one especially, if you have non-Christians in your group, is very good for having non-Christians. And what we found was people became Christians in that time. So it basically goes through what the gospel is and your response to that, and it's fairly basic, if that makes sense. So yeah, definitely the first one. If you have non-Christians, I'd probably go there. But if they're non-Christians who've been around for a while and yeah, they might already know all this, I would be happy, like totally go on to the second course, that's fine. So it is a bit of a repeat in some ways, the first course and the second course. It's similar ideas, and they're the ideas I'm going to go through in a minute. And it's really just what is the gospel, and then how our response in the first one, and then the second one is how do we notice gospel conversations? How do we notice the gospel in conversations? So, yeah, the first one, if you've got non-Christians. Second one, if people are pretty on board, I guess. Yeah? So is that a helpful way of differentiating? I hope you got the idea that we're trying to disciple people in evangelism, right? So it's the regularity. But somebody's asked, can you do half? That's totally fine. This is just to help you, if that makes sense, in your missional communities, to disciple people in evangelism. And so if you want to use the resources, totally fine. If you don't, that's fine. And so, yeah, I have no ties. Does that make sense? I don't care in some ways. I just want to be able to have something that helps you in terms of...
I guess the question is, would it work if you did half and then you did half later?
Yeah, like...
4
Yeah,
weeks. And then
yeah. I think give it a go and tell me. So, yeah, like I'm pretty fine in terms of... I think that could work. Another question was, does it matter if it's not uni students? That's totally fine as well. The whole point was we did originally start it with uni students, but what we're trying to do, and that's what we've shifted gear, is can this be for every person in every church, every Christian? And I keep on going, I know this is sort of big picture thinking, and I don't know why I think like this, But I just go, what about if every single Christian in the whole of Australia was being discipled in evangelism and they felt confident and able to be able to have good conversations, they felt well equipped. Do you know what I mean? Like, how good would that be for Australia? Anyway, I don't know. We'll just start little. And also the other question was, can you do Alpha instead? Like, I am totally fine with that. I presume Paul and Stephen are as well. And that might be where your group is up to. Like, it might be a whole group of people who aren't Christians. Alpha's was actually originally set up for new Christians, so people who were new, and it was more of a discipling sort of thing. So it's actually quite good. Like, why do you go to church? Why do you pray? It's really basic Christian sort of things. But then they found actually that it was helpful for people who weren't Christians. So they've made it as a bit more evangelistic. So yeah, I think it's a really useful tool in terms of, helping you being discipled in your faith. Yeah? Any other questions? So I don't want to feel like I'm too daunting to ask questions to. Nah, you're good? Okay. All right, so basically how this is operating is, are we able to have the other slide? Is that okay? Yeah. How to talk about your faith in everyday conversations. So this is really a combination of the first and second, and this is what we're talking about. And it's really just what is the gospel. So I presume, because you're all missional community leaders, you'll be totally all over this. So these are the 5 sort of, it used to be 2 ways to live. Now there's 5 ways? Nah. This is just really the gospel, right? So creation, fall, redemption, renewal, and transformation, restoration. And what we've tried to do is work out language that is a bit more culturally sensitive. So if you talk about creation, people may or may not get that. But what the goal of creation is it's really it helps us work out who we are. So it's working out our identity, right? Now, the fall, some people get annoyed about brokenness. They don't feel like it's strong. But it's really helping us think through what is wrong with the world and why is there sin. Redemption is really about being saved. So it's looking at really what will save me. So that's sort of themes, I think, that we hear about, and often that translates into security, like what will save me so I will feel secure. And then there's renewal, so and transformation. So how can I change for the better? So it's once I need to get saved, but actually how do I be transformed? And then restoration is that last thing in terms of what gives us hope. So what hope is there for the future? So that's sort of the core 5 gospel principles, right? And you'll have gone over this in any sort of CU thing. But let's actually look at the next one, and we're going to look at it a bit more in depth. And this is a Soma sort of thing, and I think you've probably done this in Soma, through Soma stuff, is that right? No? Okay.
I don't think we've done this formally at Regent.
Right, okay, all right. So this comes out of Soma, which I know you're connected to, and it's really thinking about, well, what's God's story when we're thinking about identity? What's my story when I think about my identity? And it's then going out, well, what's their story or the non-Christian story about their ideas of how do they work out identity? Yeah? Yep, that one. So I'm actually going to get you to break into groups of, I think these chairs are difficult to break into groups. Nah, all good? Okay, so groups of 4 maybe, and 3 or 4 or 5. And we're looking at who or what are we created for, what does it mean to be created in God's image, and what does God think about us? And then it's starting to think about, well, yeah, what does being created in God's image change the way I think about me or him? And how does knowing others and created in God's image change the way I think about them? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm wanting you to think theologically about identity, basically, and who we are. Yeah. So I'll give you. So we've got to 11:30. There's 5. I'll sort of give you about 7 or 8 minutes. It's not much, but you get the idea. This is trying to get you into the sort of thinking of what's behind ripple effect. So into groups of 3 or 4, start working through those first 2, and we'll come back and report. Does that sound okay? Yeah. So you've got till 5:02. You all right? Can you see okay?
This is like MC leaders and evangelists.
Yeah, yeah. Stephen! Hello.
This looks like the spruce up version.
Okay, how have you gone with that? Oh, you only got through 2? Don't worry. Okay, we'll keep on moving a little bit, but what I want you to think about now is, how does the conversation about who you are come up in normal everyday conversations? So what sort of questions do people ask when they're wanting to get to know you? What are you studying? I've asked a few people this tonight. What job do you have? Yeah. Who you married to, or who you're in a relationship with? Where are you from? Yep. What other questions do we ask to get to know people? Yeah, hobbies. Because they all start saying something, don't they, about you? And when we're trying to work out who someone is, there's all these things that build up this picture. Family, yeah, there's even where as a sibling, where do you sit? Are you a middle child? That actually explains quite a bit. and already I've had a conversation today about what disc profile I am. In terms of, I'm an ID. That explains a lot about me. Okay, so we actually, in everyday conversation, we have this gospel theme coming up quite a bit. It's quite amazing, really, isn't it? And what I've noticed with my non-Christian friends is they start noticing the God part in me, if that makes sense. And so they want to know about that side of things. So one of my friends, or actually quite a few of my friends over time have said, "Why are you so confident, Julianne?" And I've just gone, I need to make this about God, because that's actually partly why. And I basically have said, every day of my life, I grew up in a Christian family, I have woken up and known how loved I am by whether my family's in a good place or not. Actually, I've known how much God has loved me, so much so that his son would die on a cross for me. Do you know what I mean? So I've got this incredible privilege of becoming who I am because of God. So being loved, being known. So I grew up in a multi-generational church. I just had oldies every week say, "How are you, Julianne?" Like from birth, pretty well. I've been known in a Christian family and a Christian church that I belong. I've been known, and also God knows me. He knows everything about me. And in fact, I often say, people think, when you get married that your husband or wife or whoever will know you. But I keep on saying, we had 4 kids in 5.5 years. Our life was crazy. And Andrew got a 10-minute summary of my day in terms of going, he just knew nothing, really. He got a summary of things, and no one really knows you, really, when you think about it. Actually, it's God who knows you the most. So I said, I've been loved, I've been known, and I belong. Like, I totally belong in God's family, and I belong to God. Like, I'm adopted into his family. Anyway, I don't usually go on and on about it. I usually just say a couple of things. But as in, can you see how much we're shaped by our identity? So how I think about things is through a gospel lens. Like, everything about me is God-shaped, if that makes sense. And one of my friends said, "It's funny how we always end up talking about God." And then she goes, "Oh, well, that's who you are. You're a God person." And I just went, yeah, how awesome is that? That actually creation shapes who we are and how we become. And actually that's something that in everyday conversation, that's a way of getting into the gospel. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Well, let's try the next one. Maybe go a bit faster. Okay, so the next one is, well, this one, I love this bit because, I don't know, I feel like we're a bunch of whingers at the moment. Would you say? I don't know. Maybe we're a bit more hopeful now we've got out of lockdown, but definitely it was a bit dark there for a while. So the next one is brokenness. So what's wrong with the world? Now, let's start off with, well, how does that come up in conversation? What do people talk about that's wrong with the world? The economy, yeah. You can tell we're coming up to an election. Yes, the government, yeah. The boss is a problem. Yep. Climate change. Uni work. Yep. Religion. Yeah, what is wrong with the world? Religion. Actually, some people do say that. Animal welfare. Sorry? What's the 1%? Oh, they're the problem with the world? Okay. That's funny. Are you doing economics? Yeah. What about just broken relationships? Like they're whinging or complaining about their kids who don't do the dishes. No, you don't have that. It's just me. Do you know what I mean? Like there's actually there's bitterness, there's hurt, there's pain. Can you hear all those sorts of things in conversations? There's a not knowing about the future. Like there's just all this, I don't know, an uncertainty or a helplessness perhaps in terms of our brokenness. So you've got about, I reckon, I'll give you a bit longer this time. How about 10 minutes to then talk about, well, why is the world such a mess? So this is thinking about God's story. What does God think about us? What does God think about our world? What does my sin and fallenness mean for me in my everyday life? And what does living in a sinful and fallen world mean for me in everyday life? So I spoke at a church, there was about 80 people there, and I asked people, do you have an answer for the suffering sort of question or the brokenness sort of question? And these are people who'd been Christians for really, there was a wide range of people, and only 10 people put up their hand and said they would have an answer to the brokenness of this world. We've got to do that work in ourselves to be able to know where God fits in. So here's a bit of 10 minutes. You've got 10 minutes to think about it. way through. All right, we might finish off there a little bit. So, yeah, how does, I don't know, does anybody want to answer any of those questions? Why is the world such a mess? What does God think about us? Anybody got some ideas? What did your group talk about? Are you not used to doing group things and speaking back? It's like none of you are able to speak. Come on, I know you can talk. Anybody wants report back on your group? Does somebody want to report back on your group in terms of the what you talked about?
For the second question, what does God think about us?
Yep.
We discussed about how He sent Jesus Christ to save us. So basically, He still sees us as savable.
Yes.
And we are precious and worthy.
Yeah.
Julianne, if you can repeat that.
That we, oh gosh. We are worthy.
To the point that He was willing to send His Son.
Yeah, to the point that He was willing to send His Son. Okay, that's good. So that's why you don't really answer, because then I've got to repeat it. Okay, any other groups? How did you guys go? What did you end up talking about?
Talking about what you were saying earlier about how when we wake up in the morning, the idea like that we are loved and
Yeah.
which is something I think that's like a universal. Sorry, that's something that God thinks. I think that God thinks about. But that's how that shaped how we think about.
Yeah. So waking up knowing that you're loved shapes, how you've become. That's right. Yeah. Okay, what about you guys? I'm getting very specific. What sort of things did you guys talk about?
We kind of just stayed very much on the why is the world such a mess
Yeah.
category.
Yeah.
But we were really just talking and elaborating on like what happened during the fall that led to the state that we're in at the moment.
Yeah.
So we kind of elaborated what sin was and how it's kind of like rejecting God's character. For instance,
Yes.
like lying is a sin because God is truth.
Yes.
Essentially, when man sinned in the first place, it rejected God's character.
Yeah.
And we rejected all the good things associated with it being like life and like
Yep.
joy and peace. So you see conflict and like
Yep.
pain and suffering and everything.
Yeah.
But we also talked about how the world doesn't see the underlying problem.
Yes.
They see the symptomatic kind of like, oh, there's just an issue, like a very simplified view of like what the issue
Yeah.
with the world is. And
Yeah.
then they come up with like if we fix this, it will fix everything.
Yeah.
Blah, blah,
Just
blah.
don't lie. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So this group was saying that sin is really a rejection of God's character, and there's underlying symptoms which often people who aren't Christians don't recognize the underlying symptoms. Yeah. Great. How about you guys? What did you end up talking about? Much the same? Yeah. Yeah. So the basic problem is sin. Yep. Yeah. And tainted everything. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Last group up the back. What did you guys talk about?
For the first question, we talked about the reason the world is such a mess is because people have forgotten God.
Yep.
They start to engage in idolatry or
Yep.
worshiping of the self,
Yeah.
which is broken our relationship with God.
Yeah. Yeah. So that we've forgotten God, and that's why things are in such a mess. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. The Christian faith, our faith, deals with sin. So most other religions, I don't think, have a good answer or don't even sort of recognize it. And atheism is really SHIT happens. In that it's the survival of the fittest. Like, things are just bad. And yeah, there's something really great about the fact that this isn't right. And in fact, about 6 weeks ago, I go bike riding with a friend of mine, and we sit and have a coffee at a coffee shop, and she was she asked me about my study, and I was saying what I'd been learning in my theological study, and she goes, "Oh, that's so interesting." And then she just listed out all the reasons that she had against Christianity, and the first one was, I just don't understand why there's so much suffering in the world. And I said, to her, the fact that you think that it shouldn't be this way shows that there's something underneath you that knows that this isn't right. And I said, and I think that actually that's because God in heaven has created this place where things are right. And I think that's what you're longing for. Anyway, she goes, I think you're right. Because she just, she was just going, I have this perception. And I basically said, if you were a true atheist, you would just go, oh, well, this is just life. But there's something in you that knows this isn't right, that this isn't how the things should be, and that you want things to go back to how it should be. And so that just gave a really great in, and we ended up having this fabulous conversation about just how things aren't right. And that's a good thing to acknowledge. Yeah. All right. Okay, so you're getting how in everyday conversation. Actually, this comes up quite a bit in terms of there's a brokenness to this world. All right, we'll get on to we might not be able to get on to the next one. Thank you so much for doing the tech. I didn't have to, I could have actually just printed it out, I suppose. All right, so then the next one is salvation and security and who or what will save me. So what do people think will save them? So if things aren't right, what will save them? Good works? Yeah, well if they are wanting to go to heaven, they think good works will save them and being a good person. A new government. Gosh. Trying harder. Control, yes. How does that come out in? Who said that? Yeah, it was you.
Either in work or relationships with people.
Yep.
Remaining some kind of power to hold things together.
Yes. Oh man, so much. Like fitness, like food, diet, like there's just so many areas that people have to control things so that the bad doesn't happen, right? So yeah, I think being disciplined, which is sort of weird, don't you think? That discipline and controlling things actually becomes the way that they can be saved. And if you point that out to them, they don't like that, but actually that's what they're looking at that will save them. And like, I don't know, are you guys into shares and stuff? My kids are so into shares, and I think that's going to save them. Anyway, and you can just see all these things that we grasp onto that will try, and we as well, like as in it creeps into us as well. Yeah. What's some other things that? Yes. Yep. So that gives you motivation and drive and all that sort of stuff. Yep. So yeah, can you see how in the conversations people are looking to be saved? And the gospel theme actually comes out in conversations. I find this one harder to shift in the conversation because it actually takes a bit of time for people to see that they're basically going from one saviour to the next. Does that make sense? So they'll try and be super disciplined. So I get bagged out all the time in my family. I've got 4 young adult children and they're all super fit and really into eating well and all that sort of stuff. I'm like bagged out all the time about, Mum, you so don't. And I'm going, what is carbohydrates? What is in protein? Like what foods do have protein? They go, how come you don't know this? You need that. Do you know what I mean? Like as in, this is like everyday sort of conversation in terms of you need these sorts of things to save you. And I'm going, yeah, but every time I exercise, it just gives me, another week in the nursing home at the other end. That's our logic in terms of the gospel. They might not see that as much. Yeah, yeah. So can you understand that people who aren't Christians don't know this? They can't see this about their own lives. They just follow on. They follow on. You go to uni. So that why? So that you can have job security, that you can live a good sort of life with enough money to not have any worries, right? Is that why you go to uni? Right. Then what's the next stage? You try and buy a house. Why do you buy a house? So that you can have security, so that you're not going from one rental property to the next. Okay? That's the next thing. We all do it. So can you see how it's not even a reflection? They don't even know that they're looking for the next thing to save them and to give them security. And it's not a security. Do you hear that? This is not real security. Yeah. Okay. We've sort of got enough time. Do you want to have a go? Like, I'll give you only 5 minutes, but do you want to have a go at talking about this? Yeah, how does God save us? You know what the questions. I'll give you 5 minutes. Sorry, it's not long. All right, so what sort of things did you guys end up chatting about? I know it was only 5 minutes and probably only one person spoke. Anybody got some thoughts that they want to add? That you were able to get to peace, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. 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 Yep. 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 So, yeah. I think what's happened for me is I've got, like, so when I was probably in my 20s and 30s, I listened a lot to what people were saying, but I realized I let people stay there, that they found their security and also hope in other things. And I actually realized I'm not being a great friend because I'm letting them try and find security in the next thing. Do you know what I mean? And so I think it's been quite a challenge for me, is going, I've listened to everybody trying to work out the next new thing to save them, and I've just listened. I haven't offered anything into this conversation, and I think that this is partly why I'm going, we need to get better at this, because actually you have really great news in that you can help people find security forever. Yeah, this is big. Yeah. So let's get good at this. Let's notice the gospel themes in conversations, and let's help them work out this is what they are looking for. Do you know that they are trying to find something that will save them, but they're totally looking in the wrong place. Yeah. All right. Well, I think to finish off, so we're launching Ripple Effect at your church. Woo! Well done. If you have a group of mature Christians who are pretty evangelistic minded, I reckon go straight to course 2. But if you have a real mix of people, I'd probably do course 1. Does that sound fair? And you feel like you know what your group is? So yeah. And I just sort of think this is a long-term project, if that makes sense. We want to be doing evangelism training regularly and long-term. We want this to be so embedded in us that we just wake up every morning and want to pray for non-Christians. Do you know what I mean? So we want to shift us as people, and we don't want to shift the whole church in terms of the culture, although this church has got a great culture in terms of evangelism. Yeah. All right, I'll pray. Can I pray for you guys? Lord, yeah, we just really pray for Regen and for the missional communities. And Lord, there's something awkward about evangelism in that we're just so culturally different in some ways. And yet you want us, we need to be the ones who are good at this, because yeah, it's not up to non-Christians to work this out, and maybe you will use people and your spirit will be at work, but actually it's on us to be as prepared and to make the most of the opportunities. And so God, I pray that we will invest time into that, and yeah, that you'll be honoured in our conversations, that our conversations will be full of grace. So God, yeah, commit this group to you, pray for them in terms of the missional communities, and yeah, just thank you for them. Amen. Excuse me. All right, I'm good.
So we're not doing that slide, that spiral conversation slide, right?
It's Karen's spiral, but most of you might know that already.
So I guess thinking about what next, okay? So if you are an MC leader, Julianne gave some guidelines. So, which module to choose? If you don't know, easy. Do module 1, right? And like you said, if you've got like a group that has a generally more mature believers or already has an evangelistic flavour, maybe module 2. the whole idea behind those exercises is to give an idea of what the conversations would be doing ripple effect in your MC. Whether it is Module 1 or Module 2, you would be talking about those things. Obviously, Module 2 is more, so Module 1 is Jesus and me. Module 2 is Jesus and conversation. So obviously, Module 2 is thinking more about how you would talk to your friends and all those things. But you would still talk about that in Module 1, but you're also talking about how the gospel applies to yourself too. So, and, as Julianne was speaking, I'm thinking, well, even though I was a Christian, I followed along a lot of what the world told me to do without thinking about it as well, right? I mean, yeah, you go to uni and you do courses and you live and you buy a car and, all that stuff, and how to survive in life. So, we have to, as part of, becoming mature Christians, is to apply the gospel to ourselves and understand what it means to be a Christian and look at our whole life through that lens. So that's a great thing for your MC to be doing. Now, if you're not an MC leader, it's good to talk to your MC leader about what they're thinking about doing. And Stephen and myself will also be talking to MC leaders about what do you reckon, how this is going to work in your group, whether you want to do it or not. One question is, all right, what if I'm not so evangelistic and I'm a leader? Is this going to work for me? The answer is, well, it's packaged quite well that you can just implement it and let the course do the work for you. So, you've got a nice upfront attention grabber, 5 or 6 minute video at the beginning, and then you've got a leadership guide and, a participant guide, and you can just go through it. So, it's not like, you should, read the leadership guide before you do it, but, it's not like you have a lot of background preparation to do. And it's designed to go for 1 hour, so, 1 hour out of your MC time. Any other questions, comments, arguments, griefs, burdens, thoughts? All quiet. I know some MCs think quite far ahead about planning what they're going to do and what they're going to do next and what they're going to do after that, and so trying to fit this in. Others not so far ahead, like Ashwood MC. And as Julianne said, maybe if you want to do half and then go and do something else and come back, that's also, it's kind of at the end of the day, it's your MC. Okay, so we promised to finish by 11:30. Special thanks to Kenneth for stepping up and helping. He was doing a lot of stuff he'd never done before, and we have attempted to record this session. So we'll see how it goes. People will have to fast forward through all the conversation bit, but at least get a gist of what's going on. And thanks for the people who stepped up to make coffee impromptu. And, of course, thank you for Julianne, not just for coming today, but there's been a lot of work preparing Ripple Effect. So it's already been a blessing to us just by coming here this morning, and we hope we bless a lot of people in our sphere of influence. So thank you, Julian. So I'm going to close in prayer, and then you're dismissed. So Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to come and to rethink about how we apply the gospel to our lives. We thank you that you truly do love us, and we have our identity in you, and we can understand the way the world works through the lens of the gospel. And we have our eternal security in you. And like Julianne said, we can help others see that they can have their eternal security in you too. Not because of us, but because of you. And because of your sacrifice on the cross and your power over sin and death. And your mission to redeem all those who turn to you and repent and call on you. So, Lord, for those in our sphere of influence, I pray on behalf of all the people in this room that we will pray for them more, that they will realize how much you love them and they will turn from their sins and put their faith and trust in you. Lord, we pray for the culture of this church. As Julianne said, if you answered all of the prayers that we asked this week, and included in those prayers will be prayers for others who don't know you, that we meet regularly, or that we are related to, or friends with, or work with, or live next to. You know who they are. You have a plan for them. They are made in your image, and you want us to be involved in their lives and to show and tell them the gospel. So we cry out to you for them right now. Lord, please give us courage and discipline, and thank you for the blessing of Julianne and this training. And we just ask you guide us this weekend and into the future for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, thank you for coming. And if some people could help clean up a little bit, that'd be great. Put back the chairs. And we'll see you tomorrow.